behalf of KCG. Our today's expert is Dr. Shilpa Jani, Head of Department Microbiology, J&J College of Science, Nadia. Handing over to you, ma'am.
Good afternoon, everybody. Dear friends, first of all, I would like to thank KCG team for giving me this opportunity to share my views at this platform. Today I am here to share my experience-based views on virology teaching at UG classes of life sciences. I know I am here with young teachers like you, so not going to load with informations. For that, Google Baba is there. So I am just going to share my views, not going to load information. So directly let me start my presentation. So in introductory classes at UG level, what we teach is general properties of viruses. There are two ways to teach viruses at UG level. You can teach these general properties by either enlisting all the properties and describe each one, or make them how viruses are different from other living systems. What makes them unique? That made them link between living and non-living. Why they were difficult to study and how they were discovered. So if we answer such questions to our students, it will become more interesting than loading the informations. Students should know how we live with microorganisms and specifically viruses. We live and prosper in clouds of viruses. Even we eat and breathe billions of viruses per day. They infect all living things on the planet. What is virus? It is an infectious, obligate, intracellular parasite made up of only two biomolecules. One is genetic material, master molecule DNA or RNA, which is covered by a protein coat known as capsid, and which may or may not be covered by a lipid membrane. We carry viral genomes as part of our own genetic material. Much study is done on microbiota of human body, and it is generally on bacteria and other eukaryotic microorganisms. But very less weightage is given to virome part. It is very interesting and even surprising to note that viruses cover nearly 67.7, means nearly 68% of genome sequences when sequencing of various genomes were analyzed from human body. Isn't it surprising? Generally, we teach these characteristics to the students. Viruses are acellular, they are neither living nor dead. They are intracellular, very small, having all type of nucleic acids. They are possessing coat and they have high specific range of host. All these are the characteristics. But how to put these characteristics against students? Now, how we will teach that they are acellular, they are not cell? At that time, we should remind our students the cell theory of Schleiden and Schwann, that all living organisms are composed of one or more cells, and cell is the most basic unit of life. But viruses are really cell? No. They are made up of just two biomolecules. They do not possess any cellular organization. Okay, so I am telling you that how we will teach that viruses are acellular. So for that purpose, we have to remind students the cell theory of Sliden and Schwann, and that living organisms are composed of one or more cells, and cell is the most basic unit of life. But viruses, they are just combination of two or three biomolecules. They do not possess cellular organization, means they are acellular. This way we have to remind cell theory before we make them know that they are acellular. Moreover, one more thing we can tell them that they are crystallizable. Tobacco mosaic viruses were crystallized by W.M. Stanley in 1935. This characteristic will also put them that they are different, they are not like cell. So viruses are crystallizable and no other living system can be crystallized. So that is one more characteristic which is very much different to other cellular organization. Then they are unable to reproduce independently of cells, means they cannot reproduce by themselves. Even they could not carry out cell division as prokaryotes and eukaryotes carry out cell division. So they do not undergo cell division. This is also remarkable difference between virus and other organisms. Great diversity is found in case of genome type. So viral genome type, we can say all type of single-stranded and double-stranded DNA, single-stranded and double-stranded RNA, RNA with various polarities, double-stranded and gapped DNA. Each and every kind of genome variety is found in case of viruses. But one thing is very much surprising that a viron can never have both DNA and RNA as genetic material. All these properties put them in non-living entity. But as they can cause diseases, they can reproduce, they are parasitic in nature, they can be considered as living things. So finally, they are put as a link between living and non-living. Viruses are smaller than any kind of cell. They are very, very small. Unit of their measurement is nanometer, which is 1 million times smaller than 1 millimeter. We can give example of an ant. An ant is nearly 1 to 2 millimeter in size. So the viruses will be 1 millionth times smaller than an ant. So to visualize students how small they are, we can give such examples. Smallpox is one of the largest viruses, about 200 nanometer. Polio is one of the smallest, about 28 nanometer in size, whereas Mimi viruses are giant viruses. So great diversity in size is found. This ultra microscopic size made their study difficult. And up to invention of electron microscope, their detailed study was not possible. Now, discovery of viruses was very challenging. That make is interesting to study because we know whenever there are challenges, it will become always interesting. The first written record of viral infection is found in the form of some drawings. Drawings from Memphis, which is a capital of ancient Egypt. It is found that this drawing was approximately 3100 years before Christ. And it is showing the symptoms of paralytic poliomyelitis. Here we can see the symptoms in this drawing. In China, smallpox was endemic before 1000 years before Christ, and in response to that, practice of variolation was developed in China. In late 18th century, Edward Jenner observed that milkmaid who caught cowpox subsequently become immune to smallpox. In May 1796, Edward Jenner used this cowpox-infected material to vaccinate 8-year boy Phip. Here you can see Phip in the photograph. And in July 1796, when the boy was inoculated with smallpox material, he did not caught smallpox. Means he did not infected even if he is inoculated with smallpox material. So that was the development of first vaccine by Edward Jenner. By the time Robert Koch and Louis Pasteur proposed germ theory of diseases in 1880. And Koch's postulates become very famous in those days. And according to his postulates, the disease-causing agent must be present in every case of disease. It must be isolated and grown in vitro. It must be reproduced when inoculated into the susceptible host, etc. Now, this was the key to open up unexplored world of disease-causing organisms. Because following this, many researchers started isolating causative agents from infected tissues. But they could not find causative agents in some cases. And why they were unable to find causative agents? That is a question. And this was actually led to discovery of viruses. In late 19th century, in 1884, Chamberlain in Pasteur's Institute developed porcelain filter, which was used to demonstrate that bacteria were retained over the filter and filtrate was sterile. Shortly after this, in 1892, Ivanovsky used these filters and found that crushed leaf extracts of infected tobacco plants were still infectious even after filtration. They could infect susceptible plants. At the same time, many other researchers documented filtrable disease-causing agents. These experiments showed that there is something smaller than bacteria that is causing disease. And these filtrable disease-causing agents were given name virus by Dutch microbiologist Beijerinck. So, history should reach to the heart of student. So when they know about history, they will take interest to study more about it. So in lower classes at undergraduate, at second year BSc level, when we teach methods of cultivation of viruses, I suggest you to tell students why we should cultivate viruses. Why we should cultivate? They are poisonous. Why we should cultivate them? Here we have to mention various applications of viruses and bacteriophages, for this application purposes, we need mass cultivation of viruses. They should know the phages and viruses are the best model system for molecular biology. They are used as cloning vectors. They are used for phage typing of various pathogens. They can be used for therapeutic purposes. They can be used, and the most Utilizable part of viruses is vaccine production. And due to their vast host specificity, they can also be applied as bioinsecticides. So, by knowing their applications, students will like to know how they can be cultivated. Then we can say that bacteriophages can be cultivated. What we require is just appropriate host cell. Means if we want to cultivate coliphages, then you require E. coli. If you want to cultivate pseudomonal phages, you need pseudomonas. So this way we can cultivate bacteriophages. We can see plaques on the plate in the lawn of bacteria. Animal viruses can be cultivated by either direct animal inoculation method or by cheek embryo technique or by tissue culture technique. You know, all these three techniques are utilized for animal virus cultivation. Now, here we get a chance to narrate story of Henrietta Lacks, who became immortal by donating her cervical cancer cells. And still, she is alive in the form of HeLa cell lines. So we can give informations of cultivation side by side. We can give importance of why viruses should be cultivated, and we can give such examples or some stories which are very interesting to know, like HeLa cells from Henrietta Lacks. Similarly, enumeration of viruses is also equally important to decide vaccine dose, infectious dose, and in many experiments of phage genetics, enumeration of viruses, knowledge of enumeration of viruses is required. So, these points are generally we are teaching at second year BSc. Now, when we teach reproductive cycles and applied aspects of bacteriophages, animal and plant viruses in final year BSc class, I suggest we should teach topics after covering basic concepts of molecular biology like central dogma, DNA replication, transcription and translation. Why? Because we know viruses, after entering in the host cell, they have to make only two major biomolecules. One is genetic material by replication and another protein, that is by transcription and translation. So if central dogma is totally in student's mind, if he is knowing how DNA and RNA are replicated, transcription and translation they are knowing, then it will be very much easy to understand various life cycles of viruses. It is very interesting to know viruses influenced central dogma of molecular biology. In the slide, you can see the central dogma proposed by Crick in 1958. In this central dogma, it was very simple that genetic information flows from DNA to RNA to protein with the usage of DNA polymerase, RNA polymerase, and translation is carried out with the help of ribosomes into protein. But the change in central dogma has occurred when in 1963, Temin reported that in some cancer viruses, a reverse flow of genetic information takes place. Temin's hypothesis was put forwarded in 1964 that in tumor viruses, RNA replicates through DNA intermediates. And that was confirmed by discovery of reverse transcriptase. Reverse transcriptase, which makes DNA from RNA templates. So, the work of Temin led to modification of central dogma. And Crick himself in 1970 modified his previous central dogma into this wider form. So the central dogma which we study now, today, is due to progress in viral genome discovery. And if student understands this, it becomes much easier to explain replication and reproductive cycles of all kind of viruses. Knowledge of central dogma and some key facts make understanding of classification and reproductive strategies of viruses easier. These are the facts. All viruses on the planet follow the rule that viral genomes must make messenger RNA that can be read by host ribosome. Why? Because viruses do not possess ribosomes. So they are relying upon host ribosomes for protein synthesis. So viral genomes must make messenger RNA which can be read by host ribosome. That is one of the rule or fact. Another is viral genomes are obligate molecular parasites that can function only after they replicate in the cell. Now, these facts were utilized by David Baltimore, and Baltimore used this insight to describe simple way for classification of viruses. How beautifully he arranged 7 classes of viruses on the basis of their genome type. If we could know genome type of a virus, we can predict probable life cycle of that particular virus. So to make students understand these classes on the basis of above facts, we can give them examples. I am giving you one example. Suppose the particular virus is of double-stranded DNA. Then what it has to do? As it is having double-stranded DNA, one of the strand will be converted into messenger RNA by transcription, and then protein synthesis will take place. So it will follow the first central dogma of Crick, very old, 58. But when the other you take, group 6, which is having plus RNA strand, but this is also plus RNA strand, but these two groups are different. Group 4 and group 6 are different. This group 4, the plus strand will be directly act as messenger RNA and will synthesize proteins, and for its replication of its genome, it will be converted into double-stranded RNA, means replicative form, and will perform replication. But in case of group 6, it is not so. Even if it is RNA plus strand, it will first convert itself into DNA by reverse transcription, and this DNA then will produce messenger RNA and proteins. In group 7, like HEPA-DNA viruses, what happens? Here also DNA first converted into RNA, then again RNA to DNA, and then messenger RNA formation. So if you teach students central dogma and the way of these classes, they will be very easily able to understand various life cycles of various kind of viruses. A typical life cycle of viruses includes steps like attachment, penetration, uncoating, transcription, translation, replication, assembly, and release, etc. So I'm not going in deep because that you know. This is the life cycle of bacteriophages. Here, generally what students take in their mind that virus is either maybe lytic or lysogenic means what? Here we have to make one concept clear for the students that the lysogenic phages like lambda-phage, when they undergo lysogeny, they will remain in progeny as prophage, but whenever they will get a chance for reproduction purpose, they must have to follow lytic cycle. So they have two options. So what we have to teach to students for lytic bacteriophages like T1 phages, there is no option. They will directly go for lytic cycle. But for lysogenic bacteria, means temperate bacteriophages have two options. They can undergo lysogeny, or whenever they want to reproduce, they will undergo lytic cycle. And one more thing, the decision is made at molecular level by an operon. So it is very interesting that an operon is also available in case of such temperate phages, which are very good example for studying transcription level regulation of genomes. Here there is a brief comparison of multiplication cycles of bacteriophages and animal viruses. Bacteriophages attach by means of tail fibers or spikes to the cell wall proteins. Now in case of animal cells, there is no cell wall. So the attachment will occur by other mean, and that is either they will attach to the plasma membrane proteins or glycoproteins available on the cell membrane. Entry is also somewhat different. In case of bacteriophages, DNA or genetic material will be injected into the host cell, whereas in case of animal viruses, it will enter by endocytosis or fusion. Uncoating is not required because directly genetic material will be introduced into the bacterial cell. Whereas in case of animal viruses, where the whole viral particle has introduced, at that time removal of capsid proteins should be there, and that process is known as uncoating. In case of bacteria, the biosynthesis of phages occurs in cytoplasm only, whereas in case of animal cells, it occurs in nucleus. In case of DNA viruses, and in case of RNA viruses, it will take place in cytoplasm. So these are the major differences in the life cycles of bacteriophages and animal viruses. The other key concepts which we should clear to the students of final year BSc, that each virus requires a different strategy for their replication depending on their genome type. Larger the virus, larger the genome, and larger the genome, it will become independent, means it will be more self-sufficient. It will not more rely on their host. As for example, the pox viruses, they are having nearly 200 genes. So it will carry polymerase and everything with itself. So it will be more self-dependent than other smaller viruses. So that should also be clear in mind of student. So these are the various locations where nucleic acid replication, capsid assembly, and release of viruses occurs in DNA virus and RNA virus, that you can easily give understanding if basic facts are clear. Finally, in the final year, students must know that viruses are partners in biological model for coexistence. And viruses have influenced many fields of life sciences. As for example, agriculture and plant pathology are the most affected area by viruses. Many viruses have affected agriculture and economy by infecting large amount of plants like tobacco mosaic virus. Then tomato leaf curl virus is damaging tomato. Pumpkin mosaic virus, potato leaf roll virus. This is pumpkin mosaic virus. They are deteriorating and infecting plants and thereby affecting economy of the country. And the most interesting one is tulip break virus. Tulip break virus is most famous for its dramatic effect on the color of tulip during 16th and 17th century. There was tulip mania in France and Holland. People of France and Holland were very crazy about broken tulip. But at that time, nobody was knowing that virus is responsible for this broken effect. And tulip break romance is now flying in the past. It is now just a romantic past. But the tulip break is because of viruses. So this is one interesting example of plant infection, tulip break. Viruses also affected largely to the human race because human race has faced many horrifying effects of viral pandemics as just now we are facing, like influenza, smallpox, HIV AIDS, polio, bird flu, chikungunya, corona, and many more new emerging viral diseases are in pipelines. So, viruses are not only affecting plants, they are affecting human population. They are responsible for cancer. Many viruses can cause human malignancies. These are the viruses which can cause human malignancies: hepatitis B and C, E and B virus, HPV 16 and 18, HTLV, and HHV8. Rouse was the first to report about cancer and virus connection. So viruses have covered so many areas of biological sciences. Vaccine industry is virus-based industry, which include cultivation, purification, and enumeration of viruses. So if knowledge of cultivation, purification, and enumeration of viruses is there, then it will be much helpful to work in vaccine industry. We can also explain our students about failure of vaccines against some RNA viruses like influenza. So why against influenza we cannot prepare a long-lasting vaccine? Here we can clear their concepts by two facts based on molecular biology. They must be recalled that RNA polymerase, which is responsible for RNA virus replication, means influenza is having RNA as genetic material. The RNA polymerase has less proofreading capacity than DNA polymerase. So there are more chances of errors in newly formed virons than the former one because of less proofreading capacity. So more mutations may lead to antigenic shifts and drifts, making failure of vaccines of RNA viruses. So while teaching with vaccine for viruses, we should give this concept also so they can know why there is less chances of vaccine success in case of some RNA viruses like influenza. Here are certain applied area of viruses. Viruses can be applied for biological control because due to their wide range of host and host specificity, viruses are become choice for the pest control. Why? Because when the viruses will be used as pest control instead of chemical insecticides, what will happen? Only the particular host, only the particular insect will be affected and the non-target organisms will remain safe. So to avoid killing of non-target insects, microbes are the remedy as biological control and viruses are the best choice or an ideal choice for pest control. Viruses like polyhedrosis viruses and granulosis viruses like baculoviruses are generally utilized for biological pest control. The evidences reported are in 1930s in Canada and USA for European spruce sawfly, pest was destroyed. These pests destroyed thousands of areas of spruce trees in 1930, and nuclear polyhedrosis viruses from Europe was checked for its control. So viruses are good choice for pest control. Viruses can also be used for therapeutic purposes. So genetically modified viruses can be used for treatment of various diseases and even certain cancers. Virus gained approval for the treatment of melanoma in late 2015, means it is a recent example. The viruses which are used to kill cancer cells are known as oncolytic viruses. So viruses can be used as therapeutic purpose. They are the best or ideal study tool for molecular and cell biology. They are used to understand basic mechanisms of molecular genetics, DNA replication, transcription, RNA processing, translation, protein transport, etc. They are the good cloning vectors for genetic engineering in gene cloning. Viruses can also be used as bioweapon, means biological warfare. One thing is very eye-opening that smallpox viruses can be used as a weapon because why? Because the most of the human population nowadays has almost no immunization against smallpox. So they are susceptible. So the new generation is susceptible to smallpox. So it can be used as bioweapon, which is a threat against mankind. So it should also be considered in our mind. Viruses have a great role in evolution. They have great genetic diversity. They are thought to be the last universal common ancestor. Viruses are still one of the largest reservoirs of unexplored genetic diversity on the earth, and they are still shaping genomes. We can give examples like phage conversion in bacteria, how they are responsible for evolution in bacteria even. So we can give examples of phage conversion, that of presence of phage will make certain bacteria to produce certain toxins like Corynebacterium diphtheria, which is in natural form it is non-pathogenic. But when there is one phage, it will start production of diphtheria toxin and it will become pathogenic. So viruses have a role in evolution. With the help of transduction and other processes, it can carry out evolution in bacteria too. Lastly, I will like to tell you that Nobel laureate Joshua Liederberg said that the single biggest threat to man's continued dominance on the planet is the virus. And our present experience is same. SARS-CoV virus that causes COVID-19 has caused havoc on the human world. It has led to rethinking and need to adapt in nearly every part of our life. Apart from the pandemic, a series of disasters from America's deadliest wildfire to Cyclone Amphan, it has become clear that there are some forces that a human cannot tame. The pandemic has made one thing very much clear. Nature is nature. Man cannot conquer the nature. Thank you all of you. Here I am winding up my presentation. Thank you all of you.